Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. We will show you the automation of the Fime brand test tool and how you can automate then the complete EMV level 3 certification. With me today is Mattia Mazzolin. He's our head of technology, and I'm David Frank, the head of sales at Paytest Lab. And yeah, let's have a look at the agenda. So the first thing which we will do is that Mattia will give you an overview of the architecture. Afterwards, we're going to do a live demo of the tool execution and then answer your questions at the end. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please raise them in the Q&A section so we don't miss them. And at the end, we're going to highlight your questions and answer them live during the webinar. Before we start, let me raise some polls, and I would like to ask you to answer on them. So the first one is, do you have any experience with level 3 test certifications? So simply choose the correct answer for you. Wait until most of you have answered. I had the chance to read through. One more answer. Yeah, there we go. So most of you have a wide experience with certifications. That's great. Then you can see how we make your life easier. And for all others, if you want to get started, then it's also certainly very interesting to hear what you have to say. So a second one, how many brand test tools do you have? Also wait a moment to see most of your answers. Perfect. So let's publish this as well. So most of you have one or two tools. That's the average, we assume as well. And that's perfect to get started with automation. And the last one, how many certifications do you run per year? But so most of you are doing one or two certifications. And with that, I hand it over to Mattia for the demo.
Thank you very much, David. So again, my name is Mattia. I'm head of technology at Paytest Lab, and I'm going to explain you today how we automate the level 3 certification, or at least the testing part of the certification, so you can do it more often and better and more accurate. Before we start with how do we do it, the question is, what do you even need for the level 3 certification? So there's a lot of things you need. You need to set up the project and everything. But if we just put or highlight the few most important things, what you need is a tester, one or a group of testers. You need a card probe. So a card probe which you can put in or use it for the contactless, use it for MaxStripe and everything else. You need an accredited level 3 testing tool. Today we're going to show you how do we do this with Fime BTT, and of course you need a terminal, pre-configured terminal with a connection to the backend hosts and everything around, so you are able to perform the tests. Now let's try to automate this a little bit. What we do here is we try to supplement the testers or enhance the testers and give them the chance to do some more in-depth testing, and let our Paytest Hub do this tedious level 3 testing for them. So all the rest of the tools stay the same. You still need the terminal, you still need the testing tool, the card probes also still stay the same. but the PayTest Hub tries to replace the testers, or at least not completely replace, but it allows them to test more often, more frequent, and of course also with greater accuracy. Now, the steps of the automation level, how do we actually do this? We are using a few tricks and a few hardware to do this. One of them is we are using cameras, we are using the Android debug bridge, we are using also other ways to detect in what kind of state the terminal is. So imagine you have a terminal, you want to figure out what does it want from you. So on the test case, it might be written start a transaction with an amount 1234. So what the tester usually reads that and tries to enter the amount. Afterwards, takes the probe, inserts it in, potentially enters the pin, and once the pin is entered, waits for the result and ejects the card. So with our tools that we have, we're trying to realize each and every step of the way. Where is the terminal actually, and what does it want from us? Once we have this, we can of course decide for the action. So the terminal also expects an action. We need to, as I mentioned before, insert the card. We also need to enter the pin, and if we have a state, we also know what the next action is and should be. So for this, we are using our robots. You will see today we are going to use the robot T4, and we have the card probes. Today we're going to use the card probes from Fime BTT, as you're going to see later on the picture. Now, the third thing, what we need to do is we need to synchronize the tests. I want to emphasize here, we are not the official facilitator of the tests. This is the tool like Fime BTT is the one. So if the test cases change, we just try to understand them and execute the transaction. We are not the ones writing the test cases. We are also not the ones that authorize at the end the report, and the report has to be sent from the BTT in order to obtain the certificate at the end. But what Fime really allows us to, Fime created the automation module API. So it's an API which we can access with our PayTest Hub in order to get the test case information. When we have this information, we can execute the transaction, and at the end, we are also sending the results of the transactions back to the Fime. So the final verdict, the final assessment actually happens then on the BTT. So that's it. These are the things we need to do. We need to detect the state. We need to act instead of a tester or a card holder. We need to assess the outcome, and we need to synchronize the test. We need to know where we are, which test cases were already executed, what do we need to execute, and what were the results of it. So this is a very basic overview. So just imagine you have a PayTest Hub, which is a cloud-based solution. It talks to a PayTest API. So this is on-premise application that is running close to the Fime BTT, close to the robot, close to the terminal, and everything else that is there. And once we have everything set up, as you will see later on in the demo, you can basically press play and let the whole solution play and execute the whole level 3. So maybe what is the difference between different what options are there available with the Fime BTT? So what you could have is two boxes, Smart Link and Smart Wait boxes. Each of them have a separate probe. One goes into the chip and one goes onto the contactless. However, since lately, Fime created something which is called Smart Connect, which I'm showing here on the camera. And this Smart Connect is a tool that has both interfaces at once. So it can do chip and it can do contactless, which can be for automation a little bit trickier because we cannot really move this from the contact interface to the contactless. And because of this, you also need our multiplexers or PayTest mocks where you put this in, so we can split the signal from the contact probe and the contactless probe in order to execute this. And with this, I think it's time for our demo. So allow me to show you a little bit how do we set up. So I have here a computer that can run the Fime BTT. I assume that everybody or almost everybody have seen the BTT, maybe still in the old skin, before brand test tool was rebranded to the Fime, but the engine behind stays the same. So maybe you've all seen this kind of part, so you have different projects. I've created some, but as these ones were already executed this morning, I propose to import a new one. So I've prepared the project, which is called the webinar. This one contains a few TSC files, and we have a clean project waiting for us. I'm going to quickly change the name so we can recognize it. I'm going to say webinar 2, and that's automated visa test. So that's the thing. Maybe can make this a little bit nicer. That's the first thing. You need to import your TPP file. In case you don't have the TPP file, you might have to fill out the questionnaire in order to get all your values right, because otherwise you will not be able to run the level 3. Once you have this, all we have to do is press start the automation server. Automation server is a separate product from Fime. It's on top of the BTT, and it allows the access from third party to the BTT in order to automate all of the test cases. So from the BTT side, that's it. It's done and it's ready. So now we can go to our PayTest hub, and I can quickly show you how does this work from the PayTest hub side. So from the PayTest hub side, what we have is we have a robot. If I quickly make this bigger, we have a robot. On the robot, we have a terminal. Today we're going to use the castles. We have the smart wave and the smart link box, and we have two probes, the contactless probe and the contact probe. So the contact probe moves in and out, and the contactless we can just turn on and off, so we don't need to have moving parts on it. The robot is also has a finger here, and is also able to press some buttons in order to start the transaction. And we have connected to the ADB, and ADB assesses what is there on the screen and what is happening right now. So the ADB is the one responsible in this case for our state detection, as I mentioned before. So beside this, in the PayTest hub, what I've also did is I've set up our terminal. So I more or less said we will need a robot, we will need a BTT tool, and we will need the ADB. And I've set up the actions at states file. So action and state file is a very basic file that needs to be set up at the beginning in order to say what kind of state exists and what kind of actions follow based on these states. We can go later into some details once everything is running, but this is the basic part and the initial part. After I have done this, what I do is I go to EMV level 3 player, and I select the terminal I want to test on. So I want to test on this one. I list the solutions, and I get a few solutions to work on. So this is the webinar 2, so the webinar that we're working now. So I can select it, and I can list the test cases. So I've got all the test cases that are available here. Some are contact, some are contactless, and these test cases then enable me to set up run them. Maybe just as an example, if I take the project from this morning and I put the list test cases, I will get a very similar list. But as you see here, there's a lot of transactions that were already executed. Some were successful, some were not. So yeah, this helps us a little bit to see also for the future which one do you maybe want to rerun, or do you want to rerun always everything. So, but as I said, I'm gonna do the fresh list. So what do I do now? I select the test cases. I will not select all of them because it takes a little bit too long for today's interval, but I'm going to select 3 here, and I might select 3 from the contactless just to be, let's say, balanced on both sides. And once I have this, all I have to do is run selected. So what will happen? It will run me a screen. These are the test cases that will execute. I'm able to check the live stream, and the transactions basically started already. So what we are doing, we are writing a test case on the go. So while we are executing the transaction, we are trying to figure out in which state we are, and based on this, we decide for the next action. And this next action is basically the test case. If I show you maybe also on the video a little bit more, so on the stream that we have here, as you see, the robot is starting to move and pressing some buttons in order to do some transactions. So as it seems, the first transaction was successful. I can also check the same thing on the BTT. So all of a sudden, the project is not empty anymore, but it has marked that the first transaction was successful. Now, as I've done this a few times, I know that the next transaction will fail. The reason behind is that the host is responding with some strange values, but nevertheless, it also helps us then to see what happens. So let us quickly wait. So the card was declined. As you see, the everything will be removed and the test case will be declined, which we correctly also detected here. If we go back to the BTT, we see that the next transaction is indeed also here declined. Once our set goes through, we will go a little bit and examine the test set itself. And I'm going to show you a little bit how you can analyze afterwards what went wrong and what should maybe the developers fix, or what should you report. So maybe in the meantime, I would like to ask, as we are waiting for the test cases to execute, are there maybe any questions already?
Not yet, no. So don't forget to raise your questions in the Q&A section, so Mattia can then happily answer them directly live in the webinar.
Okay, so if there is no questions yet, let me quickly continue. So we are now at the third test case, which is, I think, still contact. Maybe it's very important. How do we see what is on the screen? You can use either the camera. So the camera is watching from top and trying to figure out what is on the screen. Or you use some more advanced methods, which are available these days. We live in very nice times of Android, and Google gave to our availability something which is called Android Debug Bridge. This Android Debug Bridge can deliver us a lot of data. One of the data is how much battery does the terminal still have? What's the memory consumption? What is written on the screen right now? How does the screen look like? We can even get the stream. As you see here, we are streaming this directly on, and everything else. So based on this data, we can really make a good picture on what we are and where we are. And as we get this picture, we can then dynamically start and do the test cases. How do we get the states running, or how do we assess the states afterwards? That's a little bit a question that I think I should answer. So right now we are working on artificial intelligence that will help us assess this. So far we have a static table where we say if certain stuff appear on the screen, then you must be in the state you are. But this is now slowly changing. We are transitioning to the AI because the ChatGPT or similar engines are able to detect the screen and give you with a very good confidence the values that you really need. So if you show a pin screen maybe written in Chinese, or maybe you're showing a pin screen that is written in Spanish or some other language, in order not to have a static table that has to find all the possible values, you just ask the artificial intelligence and you get a pretty good answer most of the times. Of course, there's also a fallback to this what we have. So yes, and this is how we automate. And right now we did 6 test cases, but later we can also run more than 6. We can run all of them. It takes around an hour or an hour and a half to execute all the 52 test cases that were now listed. And yeah, and once we give this back to the developers, then they see directly and immediately what's wrong. They can fix, deliver new software, and instead of using the tester resources again and testing every single test case again, you can just ask the robot and the paytest hub to do so.
Perfect.
So
Shall we start some more test cases and then go into the questions? There's a few
I
now
would
coming in.
I would like to do that, but there is something I would like to show before. So
Good.
now the test set stopped, and as it stopped, I can also go back to the BTT tool and examine what was actually going on and what happened. So as you see, we have here three test cases at the beginning were executed, and 3 test cases somewhere in the middle. If you remember, before this, 3 were contact, and someone we selected contactless. And on both sides, one of them failed. So let's maybe go first to the one that passed. So what the expected outcome was that the terminal accepts, and one of the terminal approves the transaction, and one of the manual validation, which was indeed not manual but is something that we did, is device displays transaction approved message or something equivalent. Transaction must be completed with an approval without any errors. And as this happened, we were able to send this directly to the BTT, exactly this information. So they were sure from the manual validation that this really happened. And what BTT actually verified were the APDU. So they expected that the second generate AC response with the TC. The ones that are some closer to the EMV know that this means that the transaction was approved also from the card side. Now, if we go to the second transaction, you see that APDU validation should actually say that transaction was approved, but it actually wasn't. So if I press on this, I should get the whole traffic between the card and the terminal, and I can see that the second JNIC was from terminal side was requesting transaction to be approved, but at the end it was declined for some reason. This some reason is very clear to us. Why? Because the host is not a real host, but it's a simulator, and it does not do all the cryptology in the background that it should, and that's why the test case failed. And yes, and very similar was here. The manual validation here was that terminal automatically selects Visa credit application, which obviously didn't happen, and that's why this test case actually failed. But the previous ones were successful. So yes, that's a very basic analysis now of what happened, and yeah, I'm happy to answer some of the questions. But before that, let's maybe, as you mentioned,
let's start some tests.
Run a few test cases. Maybe I'm gonna skip a few because otherwise it really takes a long time. But let's go some.
Well,
I don't know. Here I'm gonna take some.
You can just run it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay, let's just run it and we'll see then afterwards what's happening.
Okay. So the first question I'm going to highlight is submitted in 2 parts. So the first part is here, what it means writing test case on the go. And then the second part is this one here, belonging together. When we upload the test cases from the BTT for the first time, Then the second step is we need to write the test for the robot to execute, or is it
No,
pulled in automatically?
no, that's holding automatically. So what it actually does is, maybe let me show you quickly. When we start a transaction, very simple. When we start a transaction, we send something like an initiate test case, and we say what kind of test case do we want to initiate. And as we initiate the test case, we get back the data from the BTT saying what kind of amount, what kind of PIN do we need to answer, what is the expected outcome, what is the description, and so on. So what are the validations we should take care and check, and everything else. So based on this, we know how to start the transaction and what does the transaction want from us. Once we have this, we are just following the terminal. So once we started the transaction, it probably asks us, please insert the card. And as we recognize this, we insert the card. And this is what I mean writing the test case on the go. We try to see and figure out what is written on the screen or what does terminal want from us. And based on this, we create a step which we then record there and show what's up. So here I see that in this case now something actually broke, but yeah, because it doesn't know what to do. But generally we try to figure out what is the problem, what is the current expectation. That's why we do something. So by the way, this test cases was not working and we investigated before. I'm really lucky to selected it. It should be a test case for the purchase with cashback, but it's written on the API that it should be a sale, and that's why. So I'm going to cancel and I'm going to select then afterwards again all the test cases.
Okay. So let's continue then with the next question.
Yes.
How do you manage the card image? Is it from the Fime BTT tool or it's from PayTest Hub?
It's from the Fime BTT, everything. So what we just asked the Fime BTT is please start the test case, as I was showing before, start this and that test case. And once we get once we start this test case, we know that the card is there and ready. So if it said please insert the card, what we actually do is we insert the card. And we expect that the card was already loaded to the probe. We do not do anything there, with the only exception, and this exception is the max stripe. With the max stripe, we need to know when to load the card and when to execute the swipe.
Okay. And do you support other terminals than Android-based? How do you replace ADB in that situation?
Yes, so we replace the ADB with the camera. So if you do not have the Android terminal, which is very good if you have, but if you don't have, you can always install a camera on the top, and the camera will figure out what is written on the display. At the end of the day, we are doing with the ADB the same. We are just trying to get the information out, and when we get the information out, we act upon it.
Okay. And we have this one here. How can we adapt state depending on any application a repayment app can have in different screen? So how could we define the state during the terminal?
So there is not so many states. We've tried to count them, and it's around 60 different states that exist right now for all the terminals in the world. Maybe it's 61 or 62, but it's not that many. And from these ones, there is in reality 20 states that are actually being used by a terminal. So what we do, we help you write these states and actions file. So you have these states then set and ready. And very soon from now, there won't even be the need to write all these test cases. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna get the AI to assess and tell us in what kind of state the terminal is right now. And the same with the action. What should be the next action as well, of course.
Okay. Then we have a question about the user validation. So what happens with user validation? That is information on the BTT that needs to be collected. Do you pass the test case to the BTT?
Yes, we do. So this is one of the trickier parts of the level 3. You have to collect the data while you're doing the transaction. So most of the questions are, and this I mean with 80 or 90% is, was transaction approved or not approved? That is, yeah, as I said, 80 or 90% of the times this is what happens. But on other cases, sometimes it asks you, was there application ID printed on the receipt, or is there a reference number on the receipt, or was there a certain message on the screen? So was there application selection or was there not, and stuff like this. All of this stuff is slightly more difficult to detect, but of course we can detect. And when we detect it, we save it and send it at the end back to the BTT. Some stuff is more difficult to do, some less. Let me give you an example. If you need to read the receipt and you have a standalone terminal, you need an additional camera that will just watch the receipt, collect the data, save it, parse it, and then send it back. Of course, we can do that. But if you have another mean of doing this, maybe if you have in the logs that come out also the receipt, we can fetch it from there. Or if you have a semi-integrated terminal, then we can make a special extension for you that will start the transaction and of course also parse the result in a way that we can get the whole receipt, we can parse it and see what's happening with it.
Mhm. Then this card log details can be also see or checked from Paytest Hub.
Unfortunately not. We don't get enough data of the card logs on the Paytest Hub. So this is something that you need to check on the brand test tool. We do get some data, but unfortunately not enough.
Do you want to show the logs which we get?
I can try to find with the transaction finalization, we say what happened and what was there. So what were the requested data, what was the receipt? As we didn't fetch the receipt here, it's null. And then we get back more or less some of the things. There are some logs, but in a very small form. So there is some, but not too much.
Mhm. Yep. Then is it possible to use only the Fime BTT or also the UL BTT? So let me answer that one. It's the same tool. The UL BTT got rebranded to the Fime BTT, and therefore all the tools you already have, so all the brand test tool can be automated with the new firmware you see here. This is already rebranded from Fime and will be released shortly to everyone from the Fime download portal. Then we have this one. Are you using ADB functions to live stream the terminal screen?
Yes, we are. So we are using ADB in this case for a lot of things, because we want to, as I said, it's a very wonderful tool. It helps you a lot. You get really a lot of data. So as soon as we have something from the ADB, we take it. We can do the diagnostics, so we see if the memory consumption is growing and throw an alarm. We can see if CPU is really spiking up on certain test cases, and we can record that. So we can do even more than just executing the test case. We can also add some diagnostics, and we also see if the battery is being drained very fast. And based on this, the user gets a very nice overview of what's happening and is there something maybe going on, even though the certification would pass, that there is something other, very a different peculiar happening and should be maybe brought to the attention.
We got two about a bit more hardware related questions. Am I correct in saying that once the test case are imported to Paytest Hub, that your application will interpret the script instructions and perform the robotic actions accordingly? or do the robotic actions need to be coded manually?
No, they don't need to be coded manually. We just need to know what kind of terminal is mounted on. And once we know what's on the terminal, or what is on the robot, then we just tell to the paytest hub what kind of terminal is placed on, and based on this, paytest hub will do automatically. So you don't need to do anything. You don't need to say find out where the coordinates are, and as well the test cases, as mentioned before, they are written dynamically. As you see here right now, it's every step is being added step by step. So the same stream that we have, also the paytest hub has and can do a lot of validations.
Perfect, thanks. Then maybe you can show this on the camera. Can you just leave the contactless probe on or above the terminal surface, or do we need actually to tap the probe every time?
Yes, of course, I can show this. So no, you don't need to tap. What you see here in the back, and David will show right now, it's the probe is just above. And maybe you've seen before, but otherwise I'm gonna show something quickly. There is something that is called mute the probe. So what really happens, there is this one here, mute probe command. So what there is really happening, we can start the transaction on the BTT and say now mute the probe, let it not run. And once we started the transaction and we know that the terminal is ready to execute the transaction, we say, okay, now the probe should be unmuted. So we can really just turn the contactless probe on and off at our discretion whenever we want to do that.
Okay. Then can you actually present camera-based and not ADB-based tests?
We can, but I'm not prepared right now. So today we have just the ADB tests. Maybe we can do this in one of the next webinars.
Yeah,
or we can show also this.
We can arrange also a one-on-one follow-up session on that, specifically to show that, or in show it in another webinar. That's a good point as well. Then we have one regarding the API. Do you have an API to control just the robot externally, independent from the BTT scripts?
Yes, so we have something that is called Paytest API. So when you buy the robot, you get two things. You get a basic license to the Paytest hub, and where you can set up the robot, you can check what is going on. But there is an API, which is actually the API is publicly available on docs.paytestlab.com. If I'm not mistaken, maybe David, you can paste this somewhere, and you can see the API. How can you control the robot? How can you control also other hardware that we have, like a multiplexer or something that is not BTT.
Great. Do you want to switch back to Paytest Hub so we can see the robots doing magic?
Gladly.
So then we have, where is it? Here. A question regarding, so the ICC tool can also be used similar to the UL and now Fime tool. Is that offer same API to control the probe, select test case, start, stop?
Yes. So it's a API between the ICC and the API between Fime BTT are not exactly the same, but we have integrated both of them. So you can easily interchange and say, I'm going to use the ICC tool or I'm going to use the Fime BTT tool. So we are really tool agnostic. And if there would be a third one in the future that would open us an automation module, we would be more than happy to integrate that one too, if there would be enough interest.
We got one regarding fully integrated setup. So our transactions are started in a cash register. Then we use the BTT to process the payment on the terminal. Can you automate the cash register operation as well?
Yes, so we can automate it, but we need the specifications for it, and we need to code a little bit. We call this an extension. So right now we support Open Payment Initiative, we are working on an EXO protocol right now, Retailer 3.1, and then we support 3 or 4 or 5, I would have to check, additional proprietary protocols. Of course, we can integrate your one too. This is something like usually around a week of work, and then this works directly, and it actually works very well because you can fetch the receipts out and you can get more data out. So we are actually happy to do something like this.
What is the process for you to integrate a new device vendor model that you do not have in the list now?
So what we need is first we need to check how does the terminal look like. At best, we get the terminal physically, so we can make a base plate for it. So each of the terminals that is in the robot needs a special base plate where we can mount it on, and we can define the coordinates. Afterwards, we need to know how do you run the terminal. If it's a pure standalone terminal where you enter the amount and everything there, then that's it. You can just plug it in onto the robot and nothing else is necessary. If you have semi-integrated, similar to the question before, so you have an ECR where you have to, where it needs special commands to execute a transaction. In this case, we would also need to program this protocol in order to then run the transactions.
Great, thanks. We have a few more minutes left, so if you have some more questions, feel free to add them now. We got a few more to answer, so I'm gonna project the next one here. What is the language used for action script definition?
So this is a proprietary language. It's written in a YAML script. But as I said, these test cases here are done automatically. So we are doing it on the go and you do not need to write anything.
Okay.
But maybe in case you would do regression test cases and you would want a certain test case to be executed, maybe use also our multiplexer or some other types of hardware, then you would need to write this in YAML. Or there's a handy UI which you can get or check on one of the webinars we hosted a few months ago.
Great. We have time for 2 more questions, I would say. So we're gonna. Oh, let's just move something. There's this one here. Can terminal configurations be changed for special scenarios like service testing?
Yes, they can be changed. So as I said, there is the action file and the states file. So if you have a special use cases, mostly you can accommodate everything in one. But if you think you cannot accommodate this, then you just make a special environment with special states and actions which will accommodate this.
Okay. And can ATM test cases be simulated as well?
The problem is how do you bring the ATM on the robot? That's here the biggest problem. I don't think there would be any issues simulating the test cases itself, figuring out the states and determining the next actions. But who would execute these actions? That's a little bit a trick. I can tell you that we did some proof of concept years ago with an ABB terminal. Not terminal, ABB robot, apologies, which is called Yumi, where we put it in front of the ATM and we let it execute a few cash outs and credits. But this is not something that we are actively pursuing at the moment.
We have a partner which is focusing on that, so we can make the connection there to show you some ATM tests being completed as well. I'm happy to link you up afterwards on that. Then we take this one as the last question for today, as time is already running out. How will you manage devices with CLES on the back and also ICC on the side? will it need another robot?
So contactless on the back, the probe can be placed wherever, under, above. That's usually not the problem. The biggest problem that can be is if you have a contactless on the screen and we don't have the ADB but the camera and trying to look on it. In this case, the robot T4 can have more than one arm, so it can have up to 4 arms, same as 4 terminals. But you would need for one terminal 2 arms. So one arm would be to insert the card, and second arm would be to eject to move the contactless probe close or far away.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So before we let you go, we would like to know what you would like to receive from us in a follow-up. Do you require some more information from us on pricing, architecture, technical follow-up meeting, or a one-on-one session? Let us know and we will do so. And the webinar recording will be shared with you within the next couple of days. It's going to go on our socials and our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to that. And then we say thank you very much for joining today. It was a pleasure. And we see you soon again in our next webinar.
Thank you also from my side. It was a pleasure to host you, and I hope to hear you soon.
Thanks. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.